that you're constantly worshiping or that you're constantly working on that relationship with God. And one of the things that, Brother Taysir had mentioned is that, there are industries that are working for Islamophobia and that are profiting off of this. This is an election cycle, brothers and sisters. And during an election cycle, things get a lot worse, right? And the demagoguery and the rhetoric, it's very harsh, and that's just a normal, unfortunately, election cycle, right? And so this too shall pass, right? And what we have to do is really make sure that we're strong in our faith in whatever decision that we end up taking, and that, if you do decide to take it off because you're fearful, then make sure that during the time of safety that you put it back on. So we have to really know ourselves and know our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's all I'll say.
The question is, why are white people afraid of things that, I can't read that.
There is nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, why are white people afraid of things that there's nothing to be afraid of, and what can people do to stop this? This is a three-part answer. Before talking about white people, let's talk about human beings. Number one, Ali ibn Abi Talib, karramallahu ta'ala wajhu, he said, "An-nas a'da'u ma jahilu." People are enemies of what they're ignorant of. This is just what people do anywhere. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran that He made us into various nations and tribes, li ta'arafu, right? So that we may get to know one another to help get rid of this fear. Not li ta'araku, as Sheikh bin Baz said, may Allah preserve him. He said that some people think that human beings were made differently so we can battle each other, right? But no, so that we can get to know one another and appreciate and recognize our common humanity. Because all human beings, at the end of the day, we all want to live in security, safety. We all want economic dignity. We all want to be able to have educational opportunities for our children, our family, our community. These are all basic human, these are just things that all human beings want all throughout the world. So this requires interaction. Now, why are white people in America in particular? Well, there's been a politics of fear that has been promoted very deliberately in America. We can go back to the history of America once the abolitionist movement and the end of the Civil War, Reconstruction. By the way, the majority of white Americans, even in the South, did not own slaves. 90% of white Americans in the South did not own slaves. It was 10%. However, many of those poor white people had hatred stirred up and said, oh, these black people now are free, they're going to take away what you got. This is your country. Like how some people now say, we need to take our country back. This is code language, right? So people are exploiting this, and to top it off, it's estimated by the year 2040 that America is going to be a minority country, that white Americans aren't going to be the majority. Actually, it's going to come before then, because as of right now, Arabs, Kurds, Persians, Berber people are classified as white under the current census, but the next census is a new category called Minna, Middle Eastern North African, in which these people will then no longer be white. So really we're looking at 15 years from now, America will be majority non-white, and some politicians are using this. And you look at you look at the base of these people who say 60%. There's a voting base in a certain political party that 60% of them say Muslims should be barred from coming to the country, right? Actually, 30% of them just said that the fictional country that Aladdin was in should be bombed. That just came out today. Go look it up. No, seriously, it's a poll. The country that, from Aladdin, from the movie, the Disney movie, should be bombed, right? When you look at these individuals, they come from a particular majority, ethnic makeup, and educational, social economic background. These are uneducated people. and they have not interacted with others. And the politics of fear is that Muslims, that black people, that Latinos are going to take the America away from them they're supposed to have, they're not fully enjoying as they believe. And that's just politics of fear. And what can we do against that? Unfortunately, fear in politics has always worked. And people within that party have to push back against that fear mongering. What can people do to stop this? People of color and Muslims in general, we can work with people who are not Muslim to work towards having a more, I don't like that word, tolerant, a more cooperative society. If someone just tolerates you, they really don't want you around, but I'm just going to tolerate you until I can get rid of you, right? We want to cooperate, right? Ta'awunu ala birri wa taqwa, as the Quran says. You cooperate with each other based upon piety and righteousness. But as far as racism in America and who has power, because racism really means prejudice plus power, if you understand the definition of racism. Someone can be a bigot, but they have no positional power in society. They're not racist because their bigotry is not affecting the lives of the people in the status quo. So really it is primarily white Americans' responsibility to end racism in America. It's their primary responsibility, and people like Tim Wise and other people who are involved in racial justice and talking about it, Father Flager in Chicago, I love that guy. They're involved in it. It's white Americans who have to step up more to the plate, and that's not something that we as people of color can solve for white America. White America has to, we can give suggestions, but they're the ones who have to spearhead that. Wallahu a'lam. God is best.
If you don't mind me just jumping in for 1 second. Just one thing I wanted to jump in on. The first part is one of the fears that I have about how we address this issue is these types of questions, these responses. Because what they tell me, and I could be wrong, I don't know anything about the one who wrote it, but that the messaging isn't getting across, right? So the message is the issue is white people and they're just afraid of things that they don't understand, right? And as Imam Dawood said at the very beginning of the answer, that's a human problem. That's not a white problem, that's not a black problem, that's not an Arab problem. Everyone has that. And so I think we just have to be able to parse this language properly. One, Islam is not a religion for one group of people. Islam doesn't mean Arab, it doesn't mean Pakistani. In America, Muslims are primarily African American, South Asian, and then Arab. So there aren't high percentages of white Muslims, but there are white Muslims. Yeah. And you can be white and be Muslim, and that's not an oxymoron, right? And so we have to be careful when we're talking about Islamophobia, not to racialize Islam, right? And then to talk about it. Now, one of the difficulties with that is that America is a very racialized place. And so it's very hard to talk about racism, to talk about what's happening without talking about race. In fact, it's malpractice not to bring race into the conversation. And so we just have to be able to walk that line properly, and I think Imam Dawood does it really well, but I think we gotta be really careful, right? Because this is about Islam, and if we're gonna be trustworthy to this religion, we don't get to say this religion is for this group of people and not for this group of people. Like, you can't do that, and that's really, that's a really horrible sin that we would be committing in front of God.
I just wanted to add to that point, just to kind of reiterate what Imam Dawood had said. I think it's really important that we call upon, and whatever access we have, to the silent majority of America to speak up and to remind America of its ideals. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if we're talking about this idea of fear, again, if there's anything that you, or if there's one thing that you take from tonight, is that you have to understand the trajectory. You have to understand the history. You have to understand, how it is that we got here. Yes, election cycle, but I think also we have to understand that America is going through some major shifts right now. And two major shifts that I want to emphasize are, number one, we have an economic shift in our country, which, we have an entire middle class that's being eroded. And, if we're talking about starting from the 1980s and onwards, a lot of those jobs are going overseas. And, and so what happens, the same institution or government that's sending these jobs overseas, and I'm just being very, general, I'm generalizing this, right? that's the same government or people that is kind of otherizing or adding on to this idea of, maybe Islamophobia or whatever it is. So there is a real fear out there, right? And there are a lot of uncertainties, and the American middle class is very feeling very uncertain, and that's a major shift that's going on. The second major shift that I want to highlight is demographic shifts and changes that are happening in our country, which Imam Dawood had spoken about, is that, within 20 years, according to polls, within 20 years, I guess white America, I'm going to put that in quotes, they will not be, or that demographic will not be the majority in our country. And perhaps that can also lead to a lot of the fear or uncertainty. So again, we live here. We have to know what's going on. The second thing, how can we stop this? Again, I echo what Brother Taysir had said. And one of the things that I want to really call our attention to is we have to really be involved in local issues, in state issues. Just recently there's the whole thing that came out in Flint about the lead poisoning, in the water. And these are issues that we as a Muslim community or a community in general, we have to be at the forefront of. It's not an option to stay quiet, right? We can't call upon the silent majority to speak up in support of us when we're not even supportive of a lot of these real issues that are happening in our backyard. So it's really important that we break out of, our enclosed communities or our masjid community or whatever, and make sure that's part of our life, but also what are issues that, take on hate, water rights, or, the water shutdown in Detroit. Where are we in that playing field? Are we working on those issues just as much as we are working for our own community? And what Imam Dawood had said, it's not just us, right? It's justice for all. And actually, God calls us to that, right? To be people of justice and to be people that encourage justice and encourage good and that, serve humanity.
Real quick, thank you. We have Councilman Mac Bridges. He wanted to come up and share a few words, so I wanted to invite him to the stage. And then after that, I'd like to have Councilwoman Teresa Rich also come up and she can share a few words as well before we want to bring her on. So come on.
First, I wanted to thank the Tahi Center for sponsoring this program tonight. I've been very much involved in this center. I remember this location was small, and I was playing a role in expanding this facility for many years. So I just wanted to recognize that and let you know about that. Also, I wanted to just thank the panelists for the expansive and comprehensive conversation in regards to the history of America, where we're currently at in regards to the issue of acceptance and diversity. And because I know that's still a challenge in our community. But the fact that you're here today as a religion that is a world religion, one of the world's greatest religions that we've had in our world, Islam, as well as Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism. So I'm very mindful of the fact that this issue of Islamophobia is an issue that is common to America from the standpoint of other races that has been facing issues of acceptance. So I'm very mindful of that and the fact that this forum is an opportunity for us to become more educated and informed regarding this particular issue. Farmington Hills is a great community, and we are a diverse community. We're still working to fully integrate diversity in our community. We have, like Councilman Rich spoke about, our multicultural racial commission, which is an opportunity to become more educated and informed regarding the many different races and religions in our community. But we still have work to do, and we'll continue to work on that. Our police chief, Chuck Davis, is here, and his sergeant is also here as well to demonstrate our commitment toward making sure that everybody is respected and treated fairly in our community. So I want to thank our chief for being here tonight. The fact is that we continue to work on the issue of acceptance in our community, fully integrating, And we need everybody to be involved in our community. What makes a great community is that in order to build bridges, reduce fear, ignorance, is to be involved in the community. And there's been many different suggestions on how to get involved in the community regarding commonality of issues facing the African American community versus the other people in our community. Join together, work together for the common good of educating people and being involved in our community. So I just wanted to make those comments to you that Farmington Hills is a great community, and this program tonight is an opportunity to be more informed regarding the issue of acceptance and fully integrating everybody in our community, and very happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. You've already heard from me once, so I'll be very brief. Again, my name is Teresa Rich. I'm on the Farmington Hills City Council. Thank you so much for the wisdom this evening, for driving the conversation. You know, I'm really fortunate because my children attended an international school, and they have relationships with a number of our members here, as well as many different ethnicities. That's what makes this community special. That's what makes coming to Tawheed special. And I encourage you all to continue the conversation. Please come to Christine Gregg's coffee hour tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Chris? 10 o'clock at Farmington Hills City Hall. And wishing everyone a lovely new year and much peace in 2016.
Okay, so just one question that is on here that they're asking us from the moderators. Oh, no, right here, okay.
What is the significance of the hijab? Because I see so many, but I really don't know what it means or what it means to you, what it represents.
It's a great question. I was just saying I haven't been asked this in a really long time. When we talk about symbols, and if we identify the scarf as a symbol of our faith,
Can you just repeat the
yeah,
question?
so the question is, what does the hijab mean? What is the significance of it, and what does the symbol represent? Is that correct? So we believe in our religion that both men and women, and I'm going to kind of start off like that, have to cover certain parts of their body as a form of modesty, right? And so it's not just women that cover, but it's also men that cover as well. So you'll see Muslim women, either they wear a scarf or they will wear loose clothing or modest clothing, and for the men, you probably will not see Muslim men walk around in, I don't know, short. Yeah, exactly, Speedos, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if we're going on the opposite extreme. So both men and women in our religion have certain parts of their body that they need to cover for modesty, right? And the idea also is that, and I think this is something in America we can really appreciate, that our culture, unfortunately, these days has become over-sexualized with imagery. And, if you take a look at just what our teenagers, our youth are observing on a daily and regular basis is kind of the objectification of a body, right? For both men and women, because honestly, it happens on both sides at this point. And so, what the idea of covering for both men and women is this idea that, to move away from the objectification of the body. And because our faith, we believe in the importance of mind and body and soul. And it's to take that emphasis away so that, to be modest in society. And, to be honest with you, women throughout history have covered. I've never seen an image or statue of Mary without some sort of covering on her head. And so it's kind of a commonality amongst, women of many faiths that this is a general part. You still see it like some of the Amish women, they'll cover their hair. Say it again? And nuns and so on. Say it again? Orthodox Jews, absolutely. If they're not covering, then they're wearing wig. I mean, the idea is that they're covering, right? And so it's this idea of modesty, really, that's in our religion. And, you know, again, I think, you know, just as an American, born and raised in America, and just kind of seeing the degradation of, you know, and the overemphasis on the human body and how hypersexualized it is in society. Personally, I really appreciate wearing the hijab because people will, you know, it really adds that level of modesty to my life. Yeah.
So, can you
Just real quick, there was a note someone mentioned that there will be a tour of the masjid after the program, so just want to make that announcement. Go ahead.
So we want to make sure that we wrap up in time too, but this question was given to me, I can't pull it up on the phone anymore, but I remember it. And it's written by a Muslim, and he or she is asking, do we share some of the culpability in terms of a certain element of isolationism for Islamophobia? And I think it's very important that we understand when you respond to a question, it really depends who's asking it, what audience you respond in. So if a non-Muslim were to tell me that question, or ask me that question, I'd say that's victim blaming. You are telling us that it's the victim's fault that they are receiving hate, right? And that's how I would respond. But if a Muslim asks me it, I would say, well, it depends who you're talking about when you talk about Muslims. Because African American Muslims, they're not isolationists, and they've been here for a very, very long time, from before this country was even formed as a country, and they've engaged this country in a multitude of different ways. And yet, for some reason, people still, when they talk about Muslims, it's though they don't exist. And it's as though when they say Muslim, they're talking about brown people, right? South Asians or Arabs. Even though the largest group of Muslims in America are African American. And so if you're talking about immigrants from Southeast Asia, or South Asia, excuse me, and Arabs, again, I would hate to generalize everyone, but there is a level of some isolationism in certain pockets of the community. But still, I would still say that if you want us to engage based because we're afraid, I don't think that's a good intention. I think we should be engaging because it's part of our religion, right? So one of the sunan of Allah, one of the ways of God on the earth, is He said one of the wisdoms of us creating you into peoples and tribes and in different languages is so that you can come to know one another. It's not so that you can make sure that you're diplomatic so then that doesn't come back and bite you, right? No, you do it because it's an act of worship, right? And so in that regard, I think we need to do more of it. But I just wanted to give all of that context because I don't think it's fair to say, you know what, Muslims, this is happening because of you. And I don't think that's a fair assessment at all of what's going on.
This one? Yeah. There's a sister that had a question. She has her hand up. I'll answer this one first and then we'll get to you, sister, inshallah. At a national level, what are the legal, I guess, avenues in lawsuit for anti-defamation of Muslims in general? The United States of America has the most liberal free speech laws of any country in the world. Certain things that are said about Islam and Muslims in this country, forget Muslim majority countries, couldn't even be said 30 miles from here over in Prime Minister Trudeau's country now, right? No, seriously. So, yeah, we should give him a hand. He's actually, I wish we had a president like him right now, right? But just to slur Islam or Muslims in general, there is absolutely no legal remedy relating to this. I actually met with 2 community leaders today from Grand Rapids to want to know, can't we sue or can't we have a law against anti-Muslim defamation? Like there's a law against anti-Semitism. And I was like, brothers, it's not politically correct to be anti-Semitic, but people like David Duke are still saying anti-Jewish stuff all the time, and they have websites, and the KKK is still just, I mean, the KKK is organizing against Muslims right now in many states, but they didn't forget about Jewish Americans, believe me. And they say some of the most racist things, and they have websites, and it's legal, they don't get arrested. Is it politically incorrect? It's politically incorrect. Is it politically correct these days to be anti-Muslim? Yes, but that's more of a PR problem or issue that has to be dealt with more so than there aren't legal remedies towards that. Now, if someone makes a blatantly anti-Muslim statement when you're going for a job interview, or if you get fired from a job, or if there's a hate crime, then that is punishable. We have laws relating to that. But and I'll give you an example. There was a Egyptian cleric who was on a radio show here in Metro Detroit named Zechariah Boutros, Coptic. He was saying things about Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was worse than anything Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, and Umayyah bin Khalaf ever said. I can't repeat what he said over the radio. And we went and did legal research to try to sue him. What we found is that we could not sue him because you cannot sue on behalf of a person who is dead. And we believe the Ruh Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive, but physically he's not alive. We can't file a claim of slander or liable because someone said something or wrote something defamatory against him or against the Quran. It is completely legal in our great country, the United States of America. This is the last question. Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. Thank you very much. I have one comment to make, but now if anyone wants to make another a comment, we close with dua. But she raised a point in terms of like racialization and how people who are in the majority try to define or marginalize people who aren't in the majority, the minority. And as I talked about, justice isn't just us. Let me remind you of the ayat of the Quran where Allah says, do you enjoin upon people bir, piety, but you forget it for yourselves? Yet you recite the book, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you have any intelligence? So, while we talk about Islamophobia and racism, we have to be honest and address, we have racism and tribalism amongst ourselves as Muslims. And especially when it comes to the issue of marriage, good God, don't bring someone to marry someone else's daughter from another ethnicity. You'll pull out a fatwa from 1,200 years ago about something. Like we have to be honest and deal. We have to be honest and deal that, you know, we also have to, not just the inner spiritual purification that C. Taysir was talking about, but we also have to work on our internal dynamics as a community, because if we were to be honest, alhamdulillah, Tawheed Center is one of the few that's more inclusive, but many of our masajid are really cultural centers masquerading as mosques, if we were to be honest and frank about that. And even how we socialize outside of the masajid is really, for many of us, it's really nationalistic and ethnic based. I'm not even talking about people who can't speak English well. I'm talking about even this is being played out amongst children of immigrants. So let's keep that in mind. While we're discussing Islamophobia, we do have to deal with that issue.
So I guess at this point, just to wrap up the program, if you guys just have some takeaway points or closing points you'd like to make, feel free to go ahead. If not, okay, we're okay.
I just, before I end, there's a question about the hijab. If whoever wrote that, you want to come to me after, I can go ahead and answer that for you, inshallah. I guess just take away, and I don't want to take, I'll just take about a minute. Don't let the fear consume you. You know, there's a lot of good out there, there's a lot of potential for good and a lot of potential for growth. So it's important that we